there's a great little 5-word quote that I repeat to myself sometimes when I go back on putt return, and it's to avoid criticism, do nothing. And and for me, more than anything, it realigns my focus of the whole feeling of wanting to not be out there is because my focus is on avoiding criticism.
Yeah.
And so to avoid criticism, do nothing. To me, that says stop focusing on avoiding criticism.
It's
You
so
know.
true.
So,
And
anyways,
can I circle back to my son's a musician. He's a music producer and guitarist, and he had a lot of stage fright. And he's actually he really is much more in production now than performance. But and although he plays on the stuff that he produces, but what he realized was that the more that he did it without thinking about that criticism, but instead thinking about it as a growth opportunity, the easier it became, even if it didn't go perfectly. And some of his favorite performances were not perfect. They were the moments when he felt connected to the music, to the audience, when he felt that sense of connection, that was a victory, right? It was about that. But one of the things he runs into, he's in his last year at Berklee College of Music. And so he's producing a lot of young musicians, and they're really talented. And the music industry has changed a lot. So you don't wait till you put out an 8-song album. You're just putting songs out there all the time on these streaming platforms. And the artists who are, again, so much talent. So how do you could be overwhelmed by that. You could go at music school, you're surrounded by thousands of talented young musicians. So how are you going to compete? Well, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't put stuff out there. And what happens is that he'll produce a first song for someone, and they're really talented and the song's great. And he's worked on it for so long. And then right before they're about to drop it, to release it, that person is like, I want to hold on to it a while longer. And he at first thought, am I doing something wrong? That they change their mind right before we're about to drop the song? But it's so common for these music school students to be afraid of putting something out there. But what's interesting in music now is that if it doesn't take off, it doesn't hurt you. You just got to keep putting stuff out there, and eventually one of them will. And a Berklee professor told me before Jonah started there, he told me that the artists that take off, the Berklee College of Music, again, I want to say Berklee College of Music because I'm not talking about UC Berkeley, the artists who end up doing well, who end up gaining a following, put out about 65 singles before something takes off. So they have to be okay with 65 songs that they loved, that they wrote, that means so much to them. And people are like, yeah, whatever. And that's a lot of criticism to be able to take. And it's not even direct criticism necessarily, but they have to be willing to have things kind of flop to get to that one that doesn't, and that opens the door to more opportunity. Because when we feel we're powerful, we are more likely to approach. It activates our approach system. And as we approach, the world expands. The world of opportunities expands to us.
my mind is like totally blown
Sorry.
tonight from all this. This is awesome. And I think a lot of this, what we've talked about, is a good segue into talking about personal power and the power of power poses, which again is something that I think you made famous from your TED Talk, and then obviously your book. So a few things from the book that stood out to me that I kind of liked, and then I want to ask you about some specifics, was this idea of a power pose is, the way you describe it in the book, is something that's open and strong, grounded and confident, comfortable and poised, grounded, confident, and solid, versus a low power pose would be awkward and tense, scared and lonely, stupid and embarrassed, closed off, threatened and vulnerable, or very, very uncomfortable. So I just love kind of the juxtaposition of the the power pose versus the low power poses. And wondering if you would just talk a little bit about what is power
Yeah.
posing? What is it not?
Yes.
When can you do it? Does it have to be physical? Can it be mental?
Yes.
All the
Yes.
things
Yes.
around
There's so
that.
much. Okay. Let me jump in, and if you need to redirect me, please do, because this is a lot. But so first, let me say this is about the study of nonverbal behavior, right? We are communicating not just through our words. Of course, we're communicating through our body language, and our body language is our facial expressions, our postures, our movement, our gestures, all those things. We are conveying information about our emotional states through our body language. We know that, for example, across cultures, certain emotions are expressed the same way on our faces. So it doesn't matter where you're from or what you were exposed to. If you feel happy, you will. There's a good chance you'll smile. Or if somebody has wide eyes and raised eyebrows, it's likely that they're feeling surprise. Those are universal expressions. But psychologists, and there's some debate about how universal those things are. But let's just say they're quite common across most cultures. People had not really looked at whether there are postures that are universal expressions of a certain emotional state. And it was actually a researcher named Jessica Tracy at the University of British Columbia who started studying power and pride. She really was noticing that when people win in athletic competitions, what do? They raise their arms in a sort of V-like shape. They lift their chin, they expand their chests, they tend to open their mouths and widen their eyes. And so it's about the most expansive posture that one might naturally adopt. And it happens in moments of victory without people thinking about it. They're not thinking now is time for me to raise my arms in the victory pose. They just do it. And she found that was true across 36 cultures, 5 continents. When people won in that moment of feeling powerful and proud, they expanded into that posture. Even people who had never seen any television or anyone else compete. Or even she found that congenitally blind athletes did the same thing. So people who had never seen anyone else do it. So this tells us this is a universal expression of feeling powerful, of feeling that moment of real strength and confidence and power. So the question was, could you flip that around? So if you're not feeling powerful, what if you adopted an expansive posture? Would it make you feel powerful? Because we know that when it comes to facial expressions, that is true. When you get people to smile in a way that causes not just the outside of the mouth to turn upward, but also the muscles around the eyes to contract. So a sort of real smile, it actually makes them feel happier, even if they don't want to, if they're feeling stubborn about it. If you get them to smile, they will feel better. But the same is true for some of these other expressions. Like if you adopt an expression of surprise for long enough, you will start to feel a bit of anxiety. So can you do the same thing with posture? And, we started by looking at these very kind of conspicuous power poses, like the Wonder Woman pose, standing with your hands on your hips and your feet apart, or the victory pose, as I was saying earlier, or one that you really would not want to do in front of other people, but your feet up on the desk and your hands behind your head, like this. These are all things that people do when they're feeling powerful and confident. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah, there it is.
There they
From
are.
the book, if you're watching, I'm showing it on the screen.
Yes, I have them too right here. So, but this is funny because this is the reason I use the doll on the cover. This is actually one of those push-up dolls where it's elastic. You press the bottom and it collapses. When you take the pressure off of yourself, that's when you feel more powerful. When you put the pressure on, people start to collapse. So that's where that idea came from. But so what we found was that when people adopted those poses before going into a stressful situation, not in the stressful situation, because most people are not playing a professional sport. where, adopting a powerful pose would be acceptable in public. But if you do this before you go in, you feel more powerful. You feel more confident. People perceive you as more powerful. You perform better than if you do what we tend to do before challenging situations, which is contract and adopt these powerless postures. So if you look at, if you do an image search, say, for job interview waiting room, you're likely to find pictures of people like this, who are, touching their faces, their necks, their heads, wrapping themselves up. That's what we do when we feel powerless. We contract. We are afraid, right? We are protecting ourselves. We don't want to be picked off by a predator. And that is not preparing us to do well in these challenging situations. It's not just power poses, but we see now any nonverbal way of expanding leads people to feel more powerful. So breathing more deeply and slowly, which is more expansive, makes people feel more powerful. Speaking more slowly, which takes up temporal space, makes people feel more powerful. Simply sitting up straight, which is more expansive than this, makes people feel more powerful, which is really important when you think about using your phone and how much time we spend collapsed over a phone. You have physical therapists who are now treating teenage boys who are having, the same kinds of spine issues that they're used to seeing in older, elderly women. We spend so much time in that contractive posture that it is affecting the way that we feel about ourselves. So sitting up straight, walking by taking longer strides and swinging our arms, all of these different things, there really aren't exceptions. When we expand, whether it's in a small way, like breathing more deeply and slowly, or by adopting this posture, it leads us to feel more powerful.
So if I just want to make sure I understand and kind of repeat back for the audience. So what I'm hearing you say, because that was one of the questions when I first came across your work, I'm like, am I going to be like in a meeting and like stand up and, do a power pose, this kind of stuff? Like that's really awkward. So more how you apply it to day-to-day life, outside of a football game. Cause Britt, you can, in a football
Yeah.
game, you can do all kinds of postures.
I'll send you a picture on Sunday after my game, Amy. I'll send
I
you.
can't
Someone will
wait.
have a picture of me, and I will be power posing for you. Don't worry.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
it. So exciting.
So outside of being an NFL player, it's more that, prior going into a big meeting, if you're by yourself and you're in a, private situation, you can do like some actual physical poses by yourself. But then when you're in the situation and in the moment, there's still a benefit if you can mentally imagine it, right? Like that.
Oh,
that to me,
absolutely.
that to me was powerful because
Yeah.
I'm thinking like in my day-to-day work and job and being in like a big presentation or something. And in that moment, I don't, because of cultural norms, you're not going to stand up and do Wonder
Sure.
Woman necessarily. But I found it fascinating that even in those moments, you can still manufacture it mentally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's your body is constantly sending feedback to your mind. So the body mind connection isn't just, mind body. It's also body mind, right? If you are expanding, you're telling your brain that you are safe, that you are confident, that you may approach. And so you want to do this in a preparatory way for the most part, although in the interaction, you want your body language still to be open and, respectable, but also to show interest in the other person. You're not trying to conquer them. You're trying to form a connection with them. There's actually a really funny, it's funny how much power posing shows up in pop culture, in TV show, in comedy. If it's being sort of mocked, and I, by the way, I have no problem with this at all. What they do is they have the character power posing in this interaction, and it comes across as so rude and unlikable. I mean, no one really, in in a meeting, you're not going to go in and stand like this, or in a job interview with your arms up in the air. But if you do it before you walk in, it really helps you. So, finding a bathroom stall, like so many people have said to me, I power posed in the bathroom stall before my job interview and I got the job. Or in your own, in the privacy of your own home, or your office, or your car even. But there was a great scene from the first season of Ted Lasso, which I love. And Rebecca is talking to Nate and Keeley. Is that right? Keeley.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically saying, but you're always confident, right? You always, you don't ever have nerves about anything. You must feel fine all the time. And she said, hardly. Have you ever walked into a room full of football club chairmen? And she said, what she does before she walks in, and she acts this out. It's a great scene.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, and she goes, I look at myself in the mirror before I walk in, and I power pose, and she does this whole huge power pose where she kind of breathes in and
yeah,
it's over the top. But the point is, of course, I can't do that in front of people, but I can look at myself in the mirror and do that. And so when I walk in, I'm already feeling good. And that it actually, I cried when it ended up on Ted Lasso. I was so happy. I loved that scene. And they also captured it perfectly. It showed up on Grey's Anatomy, many, like so many different shows, but she really captures the essence of what that's about. You're not trying to trick them into thinking that you're powerful. You're trying to show yourself that you're powerful, to open up, crack yourself open so that you can be your authentic, bravest self, so that you can approach that situation and see it as an opportunity, not as a threat, to see those people as people that you might become longtime friends with, or who you might collaborate with, not as people you're competing with.
Yeah, I like you're summoning your personal power is how.
Yes, you are summoning your personal power. That's exactly right. I'm going to say this very generically because it applies to so many sports. If a player misses, this can be true in basketball and tennis and anything. What do? They tend to look down. They collapse. Basketball, I think, is a great example because you're constantly missing. Like you're not going to get through a game and not miss. And have no one on your team miss. But if that person, when they miss, looks down, or in tennis, if they look down and collapse because they feel like they failed, they're making themselves feel even more powerless, right? So they're more likely to make another mistake. On top of it, if you take, say, again, basketball, take the point guard. If you have a point guard who collapses like that, and I don't mean in a dramatic collapse, but just if you watch closely and see their shoulders come forward a bit, they look down, the point guard is being watched by the other players, right? They're looking to see, how is that person feeling? If they're feeling powerless, then maybe we should all be feeling powerless. This is happening kind of unconsciously, but we start to mirror that body language and it becomes contagious, and then everyone's feeling that way. And so this tennis coach said, what do I do? I've got this player who's so good, like so much skill, so much talent, but she looks down when things go badly. And it just seems like she said, it seems that then it goes even worse after that. And so we kind of came up with this strategy where rather than looking down, she would take her tennis racket and stretch. So she'd actually lift it over her head as if she's stretching. And so she would be adopting a power pose. When she wanted to look down, she'd force herself into a power pose. But the funny thing about it was that it also threw off the other player. They'd be like, but she just failed and now she's power posing? Like, what is going on? So it actually was effective in two ways. We thought it would just make her feel more powerful, but it made her feel more powerful, and it made the other person feel kind of thrown off because they thought, well, I thought I just beat you, but you're now not acting like I just beat you. So it kind of threw off the other person as well. So it's the same kind of thing, same kind of idea.
Yeah, I think so. so many examples of what you talk about can relate to sports just because it's an easy public kind of example that everyone can apply. But this has been the argument for years with coaches and conditioning, and you're running and you bend over to get more air,
Sure.
and the coach always says, stand up tall. And then one day we had our scientist at Timview High School basically showed us how you actually get more breath by bending over. And so we went and showed it to our coach. We were like, see, coach, you're wrong. You know,
Yeah.
and he chastised it. He said, you guys don't understand. This isn't about getting air. This is about not letting the opponent see you hunched over, you know?
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
I've always thought about that. Anyways, um, I love the concept of the science behind using power posing and your body almost as a stimulant and
Yes.
how that can change things rather than just as a result, right? Oh, I won. Using it as a stimulant that has real physiological changes. It's so inspiring to me because everyone can do that, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Um, One just broader level question I had, why do you think society in general struggles so much with confidence and self-doubt,
Mm,
especially at this time?
oh my gosh.
And it's a broad question, take it where you want, but just
All
in
right, we've got,
general.
500 pages on this. There's so I just want to say sort of disclaimer in advance, like there is a lot of debate in psychology right now about this question, right?
Mhm.
And people feel strongly about their answer, and I don't think it's one thing, but I do think that in some ways, in we are so focused on performing a role for other people and then basing our sense of self on how people respond to that performance of a role, that we no longer have that faith in ourselves. So it's kind of moved us away from self-affirmation. So rather than affirming to ourselves who we are quietly, we're in our journal saying, I am a person who, here, I'll tell you, just like for me, I call myself like pathologically optimistic or, fatally optimistic. And it's true. I do believe, I see the universe as fundamentally friendly, not hostile. And I know that, this is a time, I'll just leave it at that, like where
Yeah.
people are not feeling good about each other. But that is who I am. And if I remind myself of that before I go out and speak or do whatever, I mean, actually, I love speaking. I should use an example of something that makes me more anxious. But before something that would make me anxious, I know that no matter what happens, and I know we're back to self-affirmation, but I'm going to come around. I know that whatever happens, I am still that person. Even if what happens, that interaction goes against my belief that the universe is fundamentally friendly, meaning if somebody behaves badly toward me, I still will see that as an exception, right? I'm not going to change. I still know I am that person, and that being that person is not just good for me, it's good for the people in my life as well. I just think that we are so focused on others' views of us now,
Yeah.
that we do not remember who we are. So when you say, I realized after talking about the authentic best self for a while, I realized that I was starting too far into the course. Like a lot of people don't know who their authentic best self is. So when I'm talking about like, here's how you express your authentic best self, I'm assuming that people know who is my authentic best self. A lot of people don't know. They know what they're supposed to look like. They know what they're supposed to do, but they don't necessarily know who they really are. And so they're just looking so much to others to affirm them or to validate who they are. They haven't had an opportunity to even develop a true grounded sense of confidence.
No, that makes sense, and I agree. And find myself having to root it out of myself.
Oh, we all
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know who you are, and I'm just going to guess based on, what I know about your family, like you did learn these things. I mean, you learned to know who you are and what you value and that no matter what, you are that person. A lot of people don't learn that.
Yeah.
Right. So they really have to kind of stop and undo some of what they have learned about themselves and find that there's actually a lot more depth there than they thought. This is getting a little off track, but I do think about, about this question a lot because there's so much I'm asked so often about it because the book that I'm writing now is on adult bullying. And so what I call social bravery is called Bullies, Bystanders, and Bravehearts. It comes out next fall. It's a painful book to write, and people want to know how do you bring out bravery in other people? We've got some work to do.
Britton and I were actually talking before this interview about the power of affirming others, and that was something that was something that our grandfather and our dad are really great examples, like at least in our own lives growing up, where they would just my grandpa would always just affirm people wherever he was. Random people he didn't even know, he would just pull them aside and say, wow, like you have just beautiful hair, or you like
I love this. So this is really interesting because it seems, at a superficial level, it could seem like what I just said goes against that. But actually, I think this is really, really interesting because that is truly affirming somebody. That is ultimately, to me, presence is about getting people to a place where they really see each other and can affirm them in that way. That is meaningful, genuine affirmation. But we're not getting that. We're getting these tiny little bits of information from other people that we think is affirmation, but it's really not. I mean, that is beautiful. I mean, that is a gift to give to somebody, to see who they are and be able to say, I see this in you. It's funny, my husband and son joke that there should be like an Amy Cuddy hype app because I really care about seeing people. And Jonah gets a kick out of I know a lot of his friends and, he's 22 and a lot of people don't know their college kids' friends, but I know them and they'll be like, see me talking to Jack, I see this in you. I know how deeply you care about this. And, I'm like holding him by the shoulders and saying, you are great. And this is what is so great about you. Anyway, but he says it would be great to be able to press, touch an app and have that voice.
I love it. We always joke about having a pocket person that you could pull out.
Exactly.
So having a pocket Amy Cuddy would be awesome. But yeah, like full circle on that is and that's something our grandpa he would say to people and about people is that you are a person of infinite worth and potential. And he believed that to his core. And I have found as well when people affirm me or if you affirm someone else, I mean, that's a small thing, as listeners, small thing. If you're a person listening and you feel like it's like, I don't know my authentic self, I don't feel like I have any worth, like I'll be the first to say that you do. Like you are, you are someone with infinite worth and potential. And then if you are someone that feels more confidence in yourself, then, let's pass that along to others. Let's affirm other people because it's just something the world needs today.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And I think, I often say, presence begets presence. When we are present with somebody else, we invite them to be present with us. And because we are giving our attention to them, giving each other our genuine, real attention is so unusual. And it's, and I do feel like we can do that. We can be present when we do feel personally powerful. And so when we feel personally powerful, we are inviting others to feel personally powerful. We're inviting them to experience that too. It's so personal power is infinite. being personally powerful doesn't take power from anyone. Unlike social power, which is fixed and zero sum, personal power is infinite. And I think that's so important to remember. If, when you say, what can leaders do? Make sure that the people who work for them feel personally powerful. Don't be afraid to have the people who are following you feel powerful. It's better for everyone, for us all to have that personal sense of agency and power.
That's beautiful. Well, Amy, we don't want to keep you. I know you have to go. I guess I just ask what one last word on anyone listening. If there's anything, obviously aside from read the book, everybody. It's incredible. I hope you know. If there's any practical thing that listeners can do tonight, tomorrow, to start into this journey and acquire this ability of presence.
Well, I would say make that list of what makes you, you. What are the things that you value so deeply that if they were somehow taken away from you, you would no longer feel like yourself? What are those things? List those things and maybe rank them or just choose one and write about why does it matter to you? Write about a time when you really were in it, experiencing that, expressing that. And that will affirm you to yourself, right? You will have already learned also a bit more about who you are. And the studies on this, as we talked about earlier, are amazing because people don't only perform better, but they are less anxious. Their levels of cortisol and epinephrine are lower. Right? So when you do this task, you're learning about yourself, you're feeling more powerful, and you're also reducing your stress. And that's contagious as well in a positive way.
Thanks, Amy. This has been incredible. We really appreciate your time and your work and your presence.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.